Elderly man leaves inheritance to neighbor's parrot. His children's reaction leads to a bizarre backyard treasure hunt. Hello, welcome, leave a like, subscribe, activate notifications, and enjoy this story. Imagine discovering that your own father's final act wasn't a gesture of love to you, but a shocking decision that left you out in the cold, replaced by a mere bird. When Samuel Harper passed away, his children expected to inherit everything. After all, they were his blood, his family. But what they found was a cruel twist of fate. Instead of the inheritance they thought was rightfully theirs, they were met with an unthinkable revelation, a will that left everything to a parrot. In the days that followed, anger and disbelief turned to desperation as they realized this wasn't just a bizarre joke. There was something more, a hidden message, a mystery buried in their father's last wishes that would force them to confront the painful truth about their relationship with him. As they dig deeper, the story takes a dark and twisted turn, revealing secrets that were never meant to see the light of day. But by the time they realize the truth, it might be too late to make amends. What would you do if the person you thought you knew best turned out to be a complete stranger? And what if their final act was designed to teach you the most heartbreaking lesson of all? In the quiet suburbs of Oakville, Connecticut, where perfectly manicured lawns stretched as far as the eye could see, Samuel Harper sat alone in his modest living room. The tick-tock of the old grandfather clock echoed through the empty house, a constant reminder of the passage of time and the loneliness that had become his unwelcome companion. At 78 years old, Samuel's weathered hands trembled as he gripped a fountain pen, hovering over a crisp sheet of legal paper. The weight of what he was about to do pressed heavily on his shoulders, causing them to slump forward. Tears welled up in his pale blue eyes, clouded by cataracts and years of unspoken sorrow. With a deep breath that seemed to rattle his very bones, Samuel began to write. I, Samuel Harper, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath all of my worldly possessions and assets to Polly. He paused, the absurdity of what he had just written hitting him like a freight train. Polly wasn't a grandchild or a long-lost relative. No, Polly was a vibrant green and yellow Amazon parrot belonging to his 10-year-old neighbor, Michael. As if on cue, a raucous squawk pierced the air. Samuel glanced out the window to see Polly perched on the fence between his property and Michael's, her feathers ruffling in the gentle spring breeze. A sad smile tugged at the corners of Samuel's mouth as he watched the bird preen itself, blissfully unaware of the role it was about to play in this bizarre turn of events. Samuel's gaze drifted to a dusty photo frame on the mantelpiece. It showed a younger version of himself, arm in arm with his late wife, Margaret. Their children, Tom and Laura, stood in front of them, gap-toothed grins plastered across their faces. The image was a stark contrast to the reality of his life now. Alone, forgotten, and filled with regret. The old man's hand shook more violently as he continued to write, explaining in painstaking detail how all his assets were to be managed for the care and well-being of a bird. It was ridiculous, he knew, but the bitterness that had taken root in his heart over years of neglect from his children had finally blossomed into this. A final act of defiance, a testament to his disappointment. As Samuel penned the last few lines of his will, memories flooded his mind. He remembered Tom's high school graduation, where his son had barely acknowledged his presence, too caught up in his own achievements to spare a moment for his old man. Then there was Laura's wedding, where he had been relegated to a table in the far corner, out of sight and out of mind. The invitations to grandchildren's birthdays that never came, the holidays spent alone with only the TV for company, each recollection was another twist of the knife in his heart. Polly's presence in his life had been unexpected. It started when Michael's father, a kind-hearted man named John, passed away suddenly from a heart attack. The boy, devastated by the loss, had found solace in talking to his pet parrot. Samuel, recognizing the pain of loss all too well, had started inviting Michael over, Polly in tow. Over time, the parrot had become a fixture in Samuel's house. Its colorful plumage and cheerful chatter brought life to the otherwise somber rooms. Michael would visit after school, regaling Samuel with stories of his day, while Polly mimicked their laughter and occasional words. It was during these visits that Samuel realized he had found something he thought he had lost forever: a family. Not the one bound by blood that had abandoned him, but one forged through shared grief, laughter, and the unconditional love of a child and his pet. As he signed his name at the bottom of the will with a flourish, Samuel felt a weight lift from his chest. He knew his decision would cause an uproar, but he couldn't bring himself to care. In his mind, he saw Tom and Laura's faces contort with shock and anger upon learning that their inheritance had quite literally flown the coop. The thought brought a mischievous twinkle to his eye. Samuel carefully folded the document and slipped it into an envelope, which he then placed in the top drawer of his desk. His task complete, he eased himself out of his chair and shuffled over to his favorite armchair by the window. As he sank into the worn leather, his arthritic fingers fumbled with the latch of a small wooden box on the side table. Inside was a collection of photographs, moments frozen in time that spoke of happier days. He pulled out a particular favorite, a snapshot of his entire family at the lake house, taken the summer before Margaret fell ill. Everyone was smiling, genuinely happy to be together. Clutching the photo to his chest, Samuel closed his eyes. The sound of children's laughter echoed in his memories, mingling with the gentle cooing of Polly outside. A single tear rolled down his cheek as he whispered, "I just wanted you here." In that moment, as if sensing the heaviness in the air, Polly flew to the windowsill. She cocked her head, looking at Samuel with her beady eyes, and squawked, "Love you, love you." Samuel's lips curved into a bittersweet smile. Those words, taught to Polly by Michael, were the ones he longed to hear from his own children. As his breathing slowed and his grip on the photograph loosened, Samuel felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. The grandfather clock chimed 3 times, its deep resonance filling the room. Samuel's eyes remained closed, his chest no longer rising and falling with each breath. The photograph slipped from his fingers, landing softly on the carpet below. Polly, unaware of the significance of the moment, repeated the phrase that would haunt the house for days to come, "Love you, love you." But Samuel Harper was beyond hearing those words now. He had taken his final breath, leaving behind a legacy that would shock his children and set in motion a series of events that would force them to confront the true meaning of family, love, and the consequences of their neglect. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room, Polly continued her vigil on the windowsill, her colorful feathers a stark contrast to the somber scene. The parrot's presence was both a comfort and a harbinger of the storm that was about to descend upon the Harper family. A storm born from one man's last, desperate attempt to be heard and remembered. The shrill ring of a cell phone shattered the tranquil morning air in downtown Boston. Tom Harper, a 45-year-old investment banker, frowned as he glanced at the caller ID. It was his sister, Laura. With a resigned sigh, he answered, "What is it, Laura? I'm heading into a meeting." "It's Dad." Laura's voice cracked on the other end. He's gone, Tom." The bustling sidewalk seemed to freeze around Tom as the words sank in. He loosened his tie, suddenly feeling constricted. "What do you mean, gone?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "The neighbor found him this morning. He passed away in his sleep," Laura explained, her voice a mixture of shock and something else Tom couldn't quite place. Was it guilt? Tom leaned against the cold stone wall of his office building, his mind racing. It had been months since he'd last spoken to his father, years since he'd visited. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. I'll book a flight to Connecticut," he managed to say. "We should meet at Dad's house." As he ended the call, Tom caught his reflection in a nearby window. For a moment, he hardly recognized the man staring back at him. Successful, wealthy, and completely alone. Hours later, Tom's rental car crunched up the gravel driveway of his childhood home in Oakville. Laura's SUV was already parked haphazardly near the porch, a testament to her frazzled state of mind. As Tom approached the front door, he noticed a young boy sitting on the steps, a vibrant parrot perched on his shoulder. The boy looked up, his eyes red-rimmed from crying. "You must be Mr. Harper's son," the boy said softly. "I'm Michael." I live next door. Tom nodded awkwardly, unsure how to interact with this child who seemed to know his father better than he did. Nice to meet you, Michael. And, your bird. This is Polly, Michael said, stroking the parrot's feathers. She was Mr. Harper's friend, too. Before Tom could respond, the front door swung open. Laura stood there, her usually perfectly coiffed hair a mess, her designer outfit wrinkled. Finally, she said, pulling Tom inside, we need to go through Dad's things. As they entered the living room, Tom was struck by how little had changed since his last visit. The same faded curtains, the old grandfather clock, even the smell of his father's pipe tobacco lingered in the air. Laura was already rummaging through drawers, pulling out papers and muttering to herself, there has to be a will somewhere. Dad wouldn't have left us hanging like this. Tom wandered over to the armchair by the window, the one their father had always favored. A photograph lay on the floor beside it. He bent to pick it up, his breath catching as he recognized the image, their last family vacation before Mom got sick. Found it! Laura's triumphant cry snapped Tom back to the present. She was waving a manila envelope, a gleam in her eye that made Tom uneasy. As Laura tore open the envelope and began to read, her expression morphed from anticipation to disbelief, then to anger. This can't be right, she sputtered. It has to be a joke. What is it? Tom asked, moving to read over her shoulder. As his eyes scanned the document, he felt the blood drain from his face. He left everything to a parrot? Tom's voice rose in disbelief. Dad's lost his mind. Laura crumpled the paper in her fist. Not just any parrot. That kid's parrot. The one sitting outside right now. As if on cue, Polly's squawk echoed from the porch. Love you, love you. The siblings exchanged a look of shock and growing resentment. The sound of the screen door creaking open drew their attention. Michael stood in the doorway, Polly on his shoulder, his young face a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Is everything okay? He asked timidly. Polly wanted to come inside. She always does when she hears Mr. Harper's clock chime. Laura's eyes narrowed dangerously. You? She hissed. You and that bird. What did you do to our father? Michael took a step back, his eyes widening in fear. I don't understand. Mr. Harper was my friend. He loved Polly. Tom placed a restraining hand on Laura's arm. Easy, sis. He's just a kid. But even as he said it, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that this boy and his parrot had somehow stolen what was rightfully theirs. As the tension in the room thickened, Polly suddenly fluttered from Michael's shoulder to the mantelpiece. With surprising dexterity, she nudged a small, ornate key that had been hidden behind a photo frame. The key clattered to the floor, the sound seeming to echo in the stunned silence. All eyes fixed on the innocent-looking key. In that moment, it became clear that Samuel Harper's last act had set in motion a chain of events that would force his children to confront not just their past, but the very essence of what it meant to be family. Tom and Laura exchanged a look of confusion and growing curiosity. What secrets had their father kept? And why had he chosen a parrot, of all things, to inherit his legacy? As the grandfather clock chimed in the background, marking the passage of time, the Harper siblings stood at the precipice of a journey they never expected, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about their father, themselves, and the true nature of inheritance. The antique key lay on the hardwood floor, its brass surface dulled with age, yet somehow managing to catch the late afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. Tom, Laura, and Michael stood frozen, their eyes fixed on this unexpected discovery. Tom was the first to move, bending down to pick up the key. He turned it over in his hands, frowning at the intricate design etched into its bow. What do you make of this, Laura? Laura snatched the key from her brother's grasp, her manicured nails clicking against the metal. It looks old. Probably opened some dusty old trunk full of worthless keepsakes. She scoffed, but her eyes betrayed a hint of curiosity. Michael stepped forward hesitantly. Mr. Harper used to tell me stories about hidden treasures, he said softly. He said the greatest treasures are often right under our noses, but were too busy looking elsewhere to notice them. Tom and Laura exchanged a look, a mix of skepticism and intrigue passing between them. "Dad and his stories," Tom muttered, but there was a note of fondness in his voice that surprised even him. "Well, we're not going to solve anything standing around here," Laura declared, her practical nature taking over. "Let's search the house. This key has to open something." As they began their search, the siblings found themselves revisiting corners of the house they had long forgotten. Each room held memories, some fond, others painful, all tinged with a newfound sense of regret. In the study, Tom ran his fingers along the spines of his father's books, pausing at a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. He remembered his father reading it to him as a child, doing all the voices. When had he stopped listening? Laura, meanwhile, was in their parents' bedroom, rifling through drawers and closets with increasingly frantic energy. She paused at her mother's vanity, catching sight of herself in the mirror. For a moment, she saw her mother's face superimposed over her own, and a lump formed in her throat. Michael and Polly followed them from room to room, the boy quiet and observant, the parrot occasionally squawking phrases that seemed eerily relevant. "Look closer," and "Not there, silly." As the search stretched on with no results, frustration began to mount. Tom loosened his tie aggressively, while Laura's hair became increasingly disheveled. They were about to give up when Michael's voice rang out from the hallway. "I think I found something." Tom and Laura rushed to where Michael stood, pointing at a small door they had overlooked the entrance to the attic. The key fit perfectly into the lock. With a deep breath, Tom turned the key. The lock clicked open, and the door creaked ajar, revealing a narrow staircase leading up into darkness. As they ascended the stairs, the musty smell of long undisturbed memories enveloped them. Tom fumbled for a light switch, and a single bare bulb flickered to life, casting long shadows across the cluttered space. The attic was a treasure trove of the past. Dusty furniture, boxes of old clothes, and forgotten knickknacks filled every corner. But it was what stood in the center of the room that caught their attention, an old steamer trunk, its leather straps cracked with age. "This has to be it," Laura whispered, her earlier bravado replaced by a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Tom knelt before the trunk, inserting the key into its lock. It turned with surprising ease, as if it had been recently oiled. The lid creaked open, and they leaned forward, eager to see what lay inside. What they found was not gold or jewels, but something far more valuable and perplexing. The trunk was filled with letters, hundreds of them, all unopened and addressed to Samuel Harper. "What in the world?" Tom murmured, picking up one of the envelopes. The return address was smudged, but he could make out a name, Elizabeth Crane. Laura grabbed another letter. "Who's Elizabeth Crane? And why does Dad have a trunk full of her letters?" As they began to sift through the letters, a small notebook fell out from between the envelopes. Tom picked it up, recognizing his father's handwriting. He began to read aloud. "My dearest Tom and Laura, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've begun to unravel the first thread of the tapestry I've woven. I know you must have questions about the will, about Polly, about these letters. All will be revealed in time, but you must be patient. And more importantly, you must be willing to look beyond what you think you know. There's a treasure buried in the backyard, but it's not what you might expect. To find it, you'll need to follow the clues I've left behind. Each one will lead you closer not just to the treasure, but to understanding the choices I've made. Your first clue lies within these letters. Read them, but remember things aren't always as they appear. With love, your father." Silence fell over the attic as the weight of Samuel's words sank in. Tom and Laura looked at each other, a whirlwind of emotions passing between them, confusion, frustration, and a growing sense that they had grossly underestimated their father. Michael, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Mr. Harper always said that the best stories have twists and turns. I think he wanted to tell you a story." As if to punctuate the boy's words, Polly suddenly squawked, "Dig deeper, dig deeper." Tom and Laura turned to the parrot in surprise, then back to the trunk full of mysteries. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows through the attic window. As night fell over Oakville, the Harper siblings found themselves at the beginning of a journey they never expected, one that would force them to confront their past, their relationships, and the true meaning of their father's legacy. With trembling hands, Tom reached for the first letter. As he broke the seal, he couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were about to change forever. The treasure hunt had begun, and with it, a chance to uncover not just their father's secrets, but the forgotten pieces of themselves. As dawn broke over Oakville, casting a soft golden glow through the dusty attic window, Tom and Laura sat surrounded by a sea of opened envelopes. They had spent the entire night reading through the mysterious letters, their eyes burning from strain and lack of sleep. The initial excitement of discovery had given way to a deep, unsettling confusion. "I don't understand," Laura mumbled, running her hands through her disheveled hair. "These letters, they're all from this Elizabeth woman, but they don't make any sense. It's like reading half of a conversation." Tom nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. "And the dates? Some of these go back decades, long before we were born. Who was she to Dad?" As if in response to their questions, Polly, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the night, suddenly squawked, "Elizabeth! My Elizabeth!" The siblings' heads snapped up, their eyes locking onto the parrot perched on an old rocking horse in the corner. For a moment, the only sound in the attic was the rustle of paper as a breeze from the open window stirred the letters. "Did you hear that?" Tom whispered, his voice barely audible. Laura nodded slowly, her face pale. It sounded just like Dad's voice. They watched in stunned silence as Polly ruffled her feathers and began to pace back and forth on her perch. The parrot's beady eyes seemed to hold secrets, and for the first time since arriving at the house, Tom and Laura felt a twinge of something beyond their initial resentment towards the bird, a spark of curiosity, and perhaps even a glimmer of understanding why their father had been so fond of Polly. As the morning wore on, Tom and Laura continued to pore over the letters, occasionally interrupted by Polly's outbursts. The parrot seemed to have an uncanny ability to mimic not just their father's voice, but his mannerisms as well. It was as if Samuel Harper's spirit lingered in the room, speaking through his feathered friend. 3:15. Remember 3:15? Polly suddenly screeched, causing both siblings to jump. "What's significant about 3:15? Tom mused, rifling through the letters for any mention of the time. Laura shrugged, her frustration evident. "I don't know, but I'm starting to think Dad's lost his mind. What kind of cruel game is this?" As the day progressed, their search for answers only led to more questions. The letters painted a picture of a passionate, secret relationship between their father and this mysterious Elizabeth. But the details were maddeningly vague, with references to places and events that meant nothing to Tom and Laura. It was late afternoon when Michael timidly knocked on the attic door, Polly immediately flying to his shoulder. I brought you some sandwiches," he said, placing a plate on a nearby box. "My mom thought you might be hungry." Tom and Laura exchanged a guilty look, realizing they had completely forgotten about the boy and his kindness amidst their frantic search. "Thank you, Michael," Tom said softly. "That's very thoughtful of you." Michael nodded, his eyes wide as he took in the chaos of the attic. "Did you find the treasure?" he asked eagerly. Laura let out a bitter laugh. "Treasure? All we've found are more questions and a parrot that seems to know more about our father than we do." As if on cue, Polly squawked again, this time in a voice that was distinctly feminine and unfamiliar to Tom and Laura. "Samuel, my love, meet me by the old oak." The room fell silent, the weight of the parrot's words hanging heavy in the air. Michael's face lit up with excitement, but Tom and Laura shared a look of shock and disbelief. That wasn't Dad's voice," Tom stammered. Laura nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the parrot. "No, it wasn't, but I think it might have been Elizabeth's." As the realization sank in, a chill ran down their spines. The parrot wasn't just mimicking their father. It was a living record of conversations long past, a keeper of secrets they were only beginning to uncover. Michael, sensing the tension in the room, quietly excused himself, leaving Tom and Laura alone with Polly and the mountain of letters. "We need to find that oak tree," Tom said decisively, standing up and stretching his stiff muscles. Laura nodded in agreement, but her expression was troubled. "Tom, what if we discover something about Dad that changes everything? Are we ready for that?" Tom paused, his hand on the attic door. He turned back to his sister, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes that she so rarely allowed others to see. "I don't know, Laura," he admitted, "but I think we owe it to Dad and to ourselves to see this through." As they descended the attic stairs, Polly's voice followed them, a haunting refrain that echoed through the house. "The truth lies beneath the old oak tree." The siblings stepped out into the fading afternoon light, the weight of unanswered questions heavy on their shoulders. As they surveyed the expansive backyard, their eyes were drawn to a massive, gnarled oak tree standing sentinel at the far end of the property. With hearts pounding and minds racing, Tom and Laura set off towards the tree, unaware that they were about to unearth a secret that would shake the very foundations of their family history. The treasure hunt their father had set in motion was far from over. In fact, it was about to take a turn that neither of them could have possibly anticipated. The old oak tree loomed before Tom and Laura, its gnarled branches reaching towards the darkening sky like arthritic fingers. As they approached, the evening breeze whispered through the leaves, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere. "This has to be it," Tom said, his voice hushed with anticipation. "The tree Polly mentioned." Laura nodded, her eyes scanning the base of the trunk. "But what are we looking for exactly? It's not like Dad left us a—" Her words cut off abruptly as her gaze fell upon a small metal plaque nestled between two prominent roots. The tarnished brass gleamed dully in the fading light. Tom crouched down, brushing away years of accumulated debris. As the inscription became visible, he read aloud, "Samuel and Elizabeth, 1965. For love is as strong as death." The siblings exchanged a bewildered look. 1965? Laura's voice quavered. That's 5 years before Mom and Dad even met." With trembling hands, Tom began to dig around the plaque. The soil was surprisingly loose, as if it had been recently disturbed. After a few moments, his fingers brushed against something solid. He pulled out a small, rusted tin box. Laura's breath caught in her throat. "Is this it? The treasure?" Tom shook his head slowly. "I don't think so. Remember what Dad's note said? The treasure isn't what you might expect." As he pried open the lid, they found not gold or jewels, but a stack of yellowed papers and a small, leather-bound journal. Tom's hands shook as he opened the journal to the first page. "My dearest children," he read aloud, his voice catching on the words. "If you're reading this, then you've taken the first step towards understanding. I know you must have many questions, and I hope this journal will provide some answers." Laura sank to the ground beside her brother, her earlier frustration giving way to a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Go on," she urged softly. Tom continued reading. "The story I'm about to tell you is one of love, loss, and the choices that shape our lives. It begins long before you were born, with a young man named Samuel Harper and a woman named Elizabeth Crane. We met in the summer of 1965, two young souls full of dreams and ambition. Elizabeth was the most beautiful, vibrant woman I'd ever known. We fell deeply in love, planning a future together. But fate had other plans. Elizabeth's family disapproved of our relationship. They were wealthy, influential people, and I was just a poor boy from the wrong side of town. They forbade her from seeing me, threatening to cut her off completely. We tried to make it work, meeting in secret, writing letters that we never sent. But the pressure became too much. Elizabeth's family sent her away to Europe, and I was left behind, heartbroken and alone. Years passed. I met your mother, fell in love again, and built the family, you know. But I never forgot Elizabeth. The letters you found in the attic were the ones I wrote but never sent, a way of holding onto the memory of my first love. Then, just a few years ago, I received a letter from Elizabeth. She had terminal cancer and wanted to see me one last time. I went to her, and in those final days we rekindled a friendship that helped heal old wounds. Elizabeth had never married, never had children. In her will, she left me a substantial inheritance, the very inheritance I've now left to Polly. But the true treasure, my children, is not the money. It's the understanding that love, in all its forms, is what gives life meaning. I know my actions must seem strange, even hurtful to you, but I hope that by sending you on this journey, you would learn not just about my past, but about yourselves. The choices we make, the loves we pursue or let go, these are what shape us. There's more to discover, more to understand. Keep following the clues and remember, the greatest treasures are often right in front of us, if only we have the courage to see them. As Tom's voice trailed off, a heavy silence fell between the siblings. The chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves seemed impossibly loud in the gathering twilight. Laura was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. All this time, we thought we knew him, but we didn't, did we? Tom shook his head, his mind reeling from the revelations. No, we didn't. We were so caught up in our own lives, we never really saw him. As they sat there, beneath the old oak tree that had stood witness to their father's secret past, Tom and Laura felt a shift in their perspectives. The anger and resentment that had driven them since learning of the will began to give way to a more complex emotion. A mix of regret, understanding, and a desperate desire to know more. In the distance, they heard Polly's voice carried on the wind. Love you, love you. The simple phrase, once dismissed as mere mimicry, now held a depth of meaning they were only beginning to grasp. Their father's legacy was far more than money or property. It was a lesson in love, forgiveness, and the enduring power of human connection. As night fell over Oakville, Tom and Laura Harper sat beneath the oak tree, surrounded by the whispers of the past and the promise of discoveries yet to come. They had embarked on this journey seeking an inheritance, but they were beginning to realize that the true treasure might be something far more valuable, a chance to understand their father, and in doing so, to understand themselves. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, Tom and Laura found themselves back in their father's study. They had spent a sleepless night poring over the journal and letters, their minds reeling from the revelations about Samuel's past. Tom sat at the old oak desk, his fingers tracing the worn leather of the journal. I feel like I'm seeing Dad for the first time, he murmured. All these years, and we never knew. Laura nodded, her eyes red-rimmed from a night of tears and contemplation. I keep thinking about all the times we brushed him off, too busy with our own lives to really listen. A soft knock at the door interrupted their reverie. Michael stood in the doorway, Polly perched on his shoulder. I hope I'm not bothering you, the boy said hesitantly, but Polly's been acting strange all morning. I thought maybe, as if on cue, the parrot let out a piercing shriek. 3:15, time's running out. Tom and Laura exchanged a startled look. There's that time again, Tom said, rifling through the papers on the desk. Dad mentioned it in his journal, but I can't figure out what it means. Laura's eyes widened suddenly. Wait a minute, she gasped, rushing over to the old grandfather clock that had stood sentinel in the corner for as long as they could remember. Look at this. Tom and Michael crowded around her as she pointed to the clock face. The hands were frozen at 3:15. It's been stuck like this for years, Laura explained, her voice trembling with excitement. We always meant to get it fixed, but we never got around to it, Tom finished, a wave of guilt washing over him. With trembling hands, Laura opened the clock's glass face. As she did, a small key fell out, clattering to the floor. Michael picked it up, his young face alight with excitement. Another key, just like in the stories Mr. Harper used to tell me. Tom took the key, turning it over in his hands. It was smaller than the one that had led them to the attic and seemed newer somehow. But what does it open? As if in answer, Polly squawked again. Beneath, beneath. The truth lies beneath. Laura's brow furrowed in concentration. Beneath. Beneath what? Tom's eyes scanned the room, finally landing on the old rug that covered most of the study floor. Without a word, he and Laura began rolling it back, revealing the hardwood underneath. And there, in the center of the floor, was a small, almost imperceptible keyhole. With hands shaking from a mixture of anticipation and fear, Tom inserted the key. It turned with a soft click, and a section of the floorboard popped up slightly. Laura gasped as Tom lifted the board, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside was a dusty wooden box, about the size of a shoebox. As Tom lifted it out, they could hear something shifting inside. He placed it on the desk, and with a deep breath, opened the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was an old pocket watch, a stack of photographs, and a sealed envelope addressed to "My children." Tom picked up the watch, his breath catching as he recognized it. "This was Grandpa's watch," he said softly. "Dad always said he lost it years ago." Laura was leafing through the photographs, her eyes filling with tears. They were snapshots of their family through the years: birthdays, graduations, weddings. But what struck her were the images of their father in the background, his face filled with pride and love, even in moments when they had hardly noticed his presence. "He was always there," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, "even when we thought he wasn't." Tom nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He picked up the envelope, breaking the seal with trembling fingers. As he unfolded the letter inside, he began to read aloud. "My dear Tom and Laura, if you're reading this, then you've followed the path I've laid out for you. I hope that along the way you've come to understand not just me, but yourselves as well. The watch you found was indeed your grandfather's. He gave it to me on his deathbed, telling me that time was the most precious gift we have. I didn't understand then, but I do now. I've watched time slip away, seen opportunities for connection pass by. But it's never too late to make a change. That's the real treasure I wanted to leave you, not money or property, but the understanding that every moment is precious, and it's never too late to show love. The inheritance I left to Polly is yours, of course. It always was. But I needed you to take this journey, to remember what's truly important. I love you both, more than you could ever know. I'm sorry for the times I couldn't express it properly, and I'm sorry for this roundabout way of telling you now. But I hope that through this journey, you've come to see the love that was always there. Remember, the greatest treasures are the moments we share with those we love. Don't let them slip away. All my love, Dad." As Tom's voice trailed off, the room fell into a profound silence. Even Polly, usually so boisterous, was quiet, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. Laura was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "He loved us all this time, and we never really saw." Tom nodded, wiping away a tear. "We were so blind, so caught up in our own lives." Michael, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Mr. Harper always said that sometimes we need to lose something to understand its value." Tom and Laura looked at the boy, then at each other, a new understanding passing between them. They had embarked on this journey seeking an inheritance, but what they had found was far more valuable: a chance to see their father and themselves in a new light. As the morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the study and the treasures they had uncovered, Tom and Laura realized that their father's final gift wasn't the money or the property. It was this moment of clarity, this chance to reconnect with the love that had always been there, waiting to be rediscovered. And as Polly finally broke her silence with a gentle love you," they knew that the real journey of healing, understanding, and reconnection was only just beginning. The warm afternoon sun filtered through the living room windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Tom and Laura sat on the old, familiar couch, surrounded by the mementos of their father's life: photographs, letters, and the pocket watch that now seemed to tick with renewed purpose. Michael sat cross-legged on the floor, Polly perched contentedly on his shoulder. The boy's presence had become a source of comfort for the siblings, a living connection to the father they were only now beginning to truly understand. Laura held the last photograph they had found in the hidden box, a candid shot of their father, smiling broadly at something off-camera. "I can't remember the last time I saw Dad smile like this," she said softly. her voice tinged with regret. Tom nodded, his fingers absently tracing the engraving on the pocket watch. We were so caught up in our own lives, our own successes. We forgot to look back. As if on cue, Polly squawked, "Look back to move forward." The siblings exchanged a glance, a mix of amusement and wonder in their eyes. The parrot's uncanny ability to channel their father's wisdom had become less eerie and more comforting as the days had passed. "You know," Tom began, his voice thoughtful, "I've been thinking about what Dad wrote in his letter, about time being precious, and it never being too late to show love." Laura nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I keep thinking about all the times I was too busy to visit, too preoccupied to really listen when he called." Michael, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Mr. Harper used to say that regret is just a lesson waiting to be learned." Tom and Laura turned to the boy, struck once again by the depth of the relationship he had shared with their father. "You're right, Michael," Tom said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "And I think it's time we started learning that lesson." Laura nodded in agreement. "But how? Dad's gone, and we can't change the past." Tom stood up, pacing the room as he often did when deep in thought. "Maybe we can't change the past, but we can honor it. And we can change the future." He turned to face his sister and Michael. "What if we used Dad's inheritance, the money he left to Polly, to create something meaningful? Something that would help others understand the importance of family, of connection." Laura's eyes lit up with understanding. "A foundation," she breathed. "We could start a foundation in Dad's name." Michael's face broke into a wide grin. "That's a great idea. Mr. Harper always said that the best way to honor someone's memory is to continue their work." As the siblings began to excitedly discuss possibilities, programs for elderly care, support for estranged families, even parrot-assisted therapy, they felt a shift in the air. The heavy weight of regret that had settled over them since their father's passing began to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose and hope. Polly, as if sensing the change in mood, began to bob her head up and down, repeating in Samuel's voice, "Love in action, love in action." Tom laughed, the sound echoing through the room, a sound that had been all too rare in recent days. "I think Dad approves," he said, reaching out to gently stroke Polly's feathers. Laura nodded, wiping away a tear. "It's funny," she mused. "When we first got here, all we could think about was the money, the property. But Dad was right. The real treasure was something else entirely. The memories," Michael chimed in. "The love. And the chance to make things right," Tom added softly. As the day wore on, the three of them, Tom, Laura, and Michael, sat together, sharing stories about Samuel. With each tale, each remembered moment, they felt closer not only to the father they had lost but to each other as well. When evening fell, Tom and Laura stood on the porch, watching as Michael headed home, Polly secure on his shoulder. The parrot turned back, letting out one final squawk, "Family forever!" The siblings exchanged a glance, a wordless understanding passing between them. They had come to their childhood home expecting to settle an estate, to deal with the practical matters of death. Instead, they had found something far more valuable, a chance at redemption, an opportunity to honor their father's memory by living the lessons he had tried so hard to teach them. As they turned to go back inside, Laura paused, her hand on the doorknob. "You know, Tom," she said softly, "I think we've finally found the treasure Dad wanted us to find." Tom nodded, his arm around his sister's shoulders. "And it was right here all along," he replied, "just waiting for us to open our eyes and see it." The door closed behind them, but the house no longer felt empty. It was filled with memories, with understanding, and with the promise of a future built on the foundation of love their father had always tried to provide. In the quiet of the evening, as a gentle breeze rustled through the old oak tree in the backyard, one could almost hear Samuel Harper's voice on the wind. Love you," and this time, Tom and Laura were finally ready to hear it. The soft glow of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and gold as Tom and Laura stood on the porch of their childhood home. A moving truck idled in the driveway, loaded with the last of their father's belongings. It had been 3 months since they'd first arrived, expecting to simply settle an estate. Instead, they'd embarked on a journey that had changed them profoundly. Laura's fingers traced the weathered wood of the porch railing. "It's strange," she murmured. "I thought I'd feel sad about selling the house, but instead it feels right," Tom finished, nodding in understanding. "Like we're not losing Dad, but carrying him with us." As if on cue, a familiar squawk pierced the morning air. They turned to see Michael approaching, Polly perched on his shoulder as always. The boy's eyes were red-rimmed, betraying the tears he'd shed earlier. "Are you really sure about this?" Michael asked, his voice quavering slightly. "About Polly coming with you?" Tom knelt down to Michael's eye level, his expression gentle. "We're sure, buddy, but remember, it's not goodbye. You'll be the first member of our foundation's youth advisory board. You'll see Polly plenty." Laura smiled, adding, "And who knows? Maybe someday you'll run the whole thing." Michael's face brightened at the prospect. "Mr. Harper would have liked that," he said softly. As they stood there, the first rays of sunlight crested the horizon, bathing them in a warm glow. Polly ruffled her feathers and let out a series of phrases that brought tears to their eyes. Love you, family forever, look back to move forward." Each phrase echoed with Samuel's voice, a poignant reminder of the man who had set them on this path. Tom cleared his throat, emotion making his voice rough. "You know, when we first heard about Dad's will, I thought he'd lost his mind, leaving everything to a parrot. But now we understand," Laura finished, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "It was never about the money. It was about the journey, about rediscovering what really matters." As they prepared to leave, each taking a final look at the house that held so many memories, they felt a profound sense of peace. The anger and resentment that had initially driven them had given way to understanding, forgiveness, and a deep appreciation for the father they had only now truly come to know. The Samuel Harper Foundation for Family Reconnection was more than just a way to use their inheritance. It was a living testament to their father's beliefs, a chance to help others discover the treasures hiding in plain sight within their own families. As they walked towards their cars, Polly suddenly spread her wings and took flight, circling above them before landing on the branch of the old oak tree. For a moment, they all held their breath, wondering if the parrot would choose to stay behind after all. But then, with a final squawk that sounded remarkably like Samuel's laughter, Polly flew back, landing gently on Tom's shoulder. Laura couldn't help but chuckle. "I think Dad's giving us his final approval." They said their goodbyes to Michael, promising to stay in touch and involve him in the foundation's work. As they drove away, Tom and Laura in one car with Polly, and the moving truck following behind, they felt not like they were leaving their father behind, but bringing him with them into a new chapter of their lives. Miles down the road, as the familiar landscapes of their childhood faded into the distance, Polly broke the contemplative silence with one final message. "The greatest treasure is the love we share. Never forget." Tom and Laura exchanged a glance, their eyes misty but their hearts full. They had come seeking an inheritance and found something far more valuable, a renewed understanding of family, love, and the enduring legacy of a father who had never stopped trying to teach them life's most important lessons. As they drove towards their future, the echoes of Samuel Harper's wisdom, carried on the wings of an extraordinary parrot, reminded them that the most precious treasures are often found in the most unexpected places. And sometimes, it takes losing something to truly understand its value. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in years, Tom and Laura Harper felt truly rich, not in money or property, but in the currency of love, understanding, and the unbreakable bonds of family. As Oakville faded in their rearview mirror, they knew that this was not an ending, but a beginning. The true inheritance their father had left them was not in his will, but in the lessons he had taught them, lessons they were now ready to learn, to live, and to pass on to others. And so, with Polly as their unlikely guide, Tom and Laura embarked on the next chapter of their lives, carrying with them the echoes of Samuel Harper's love, a love that, they now understood, had been there all along, waiting patiently for them to open their hearts and truly listen. Thank you for listening until the end. Share your opinion about the story in the comments and let us know which character you liked the most. If this story touched you and you want to hear more, click on the next story appearing on your screen. Leave a like and subscribe to our channel so we can build a great community of people who share emotional stories together. Until the next story.